Welcome to the Elden Conspiracy. This channel is mostly about presenting far-reaching theories about the story of Elden Ring. However, this is going to be a somewhat less speculative video than the others I've done, but hopefully no less interesting for it. The Rune of Death is a shadow that looms large over the story of Elden Ring. Defeating Maliketh and unleashing the rune is essential to completing the game. Yet the meaning of this event and the nature of this rune is, like anything else in the Souls games, incredibly obscure. Many theories have arisen to fill in the gaps. It is commonly believed that Marika personally removed the Rune of Destined Death from the Elden Ring and gave it to Maliketh. Were the Gloam-eyed Queen and the Godskins involved in any way? And what does any of this have to do with the Golden Order? Many others have described the Rune of Destined Death as the concept of death materialized as a rune, and that its removal has distorted the laws of life and death and the transmigration of souls. It is the first sin of Marika's regime, an act of hubris for which she and the lands between are paying a heavy price. While I do not necessarily disagree with this characterization, I believe we can be more specific. In this video, we will examine the texts surrounding the Rune of Destined Death and connect it to the overall concepts of order and fate in the universe of Elden Ring. About a year ago, when I started my first playthrough of Elden Ring, I hadn't seen the story trailer, which was released as a teaser to hype up the final product. So when I heard Roger's dialogue about the Black Knife assassins stealing the Rune of Destined Death from Maliketh the Black Blade, I felt somewhat overwhelmed by the facts and characters being revealed. I had the feeling a little bit afterward that this was all foreshadowing for a future boss or story event, and I wasn't disappointed. But this rune, once we finally get it, is different. Every other rune we acquire, whether a Great Rune, Mending Rune, or generic resource runes, we obtain as an item in our inventory. The Rune of Destined Death, however, immediately explodes into fire, becoming unbound, in the words of the finger reader in the following cinematic.
The Rune of Death is unbound. And the lands between are shrouded by death's dark fate.
Almost as if the rune was an entity, or an event, waiting to be unleashed. Looking more into the origin of this rune, there is an important dialogue from Enya after we are prevented by the roots from entering the Erdtree.
A forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation. Unleashing the rune now would be unthinkable.
Many people have interpreted this as Marika plucking the Rune of Destined Death from the Elden Ring early on in her reign, but this relies on a conflation between the Elden Ring and the Golden Order. Are they really the same thing? The description of the telescope is one of the best wellsprings of lore in the game. It talks about a fate once writ in the night skies, being fettered by the Golden Order. The Golden Order, like the Rune of Destined Death, is hard to define because it is never explicitly described, only indirectly.
Great Elden Ring, root of the Golden Order, anchor of all lands, giver of grace, wellspring of all joy.
Most people, like myself, immediately assume it to be an organization of some kind. But the organization who upholds the GO call themselves the Golden Order Fundamentalists. I'm beginning to think, in light of my recent theory, that the Golden Order being put in opposition to fate is vitally important to understanding what it actually is. So now we have to talk about fate. We'll get back on track, I promise. Fate, as it is commonly used in many works of fantasy fiction, refers to a certain preordained series of events, certain things that should happen. An example in mythology is the poem of Oedipus. Our hero is told a prophecy of horrific events looming in his future, in this case by a sphinx or other monster. The hero's efforts to change the future ensure the fulfillment of the prophecy. If we think of fate in this way, that of a preordained, inevitable future, the Golden Order is a divergent future, ordained by Queen Marika. The Golden Order is the new order of events that was not written in the night sky. So when Enya says the Rune of Destined Death was plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation, She means the rune was plucked from the destined order of events. So what sort of future was Marika trying to prevent? When we beat Maliketh and unbind the Rune of Destined Death, we do it to burn the Erdtree's roots so we can enter. The Golden Order was established as a divergent timeline to prevent the burning of the Erdtree. This event, this prophecy, and even fire itself is constantly mentioned as a taboo in the society of the Lands Between. Fire magic was considered evil until the perfumers saw its usefulness during the Shattering. Brother Corrin was tortured for seeing the Erdtree burn in prophecy. Even the Candle Tree Shield, a design from Elfale, was deemed unholy because it somewhat resembled a burning tree. The burning of the Erdtree looms over Marika's regime as this inescapable fate that they are trying to hold at bay with the power of sheer belief. But there's another character we have yet to talk about. In cut dialogue from the cutscene which plays after you beat Maliketh, the finger reader mentions black flames.
The Rune of Death is unbound. Black flames have devoured the Erdtree, and the lands between are shrouded by death's dark fate.
I believe this was changed in a patch after the game was shipped. People have differing opinions of cut content, especially as it relates to lore. But I can't help thinking this was a reference to the wielder of the Black Flame, the Gloam-eyed Queen. If this dialogue is insufficient, we can see references in items of Maliketh defeating the Gloam-eyed Queen and sealing her power. Since Maliketh is also the one who possessed the Rune of Destined Death, we can conclude, as many other lore hunters have, that Maliketh sealing the Rune of Destined Death and sealing the power of the Gloam-eyed Queen's god-slaying flame are one and the same event. Like the very concept of flame, the Gloam-eyed Queen is completely unheard of in the religion of the Erdtree. Her name has been wiped from history. So to put everything together, I believe in the fate written in the night sky, the Gloam-eyed Queen was the one destined to burn the Erdtree, but her power was somehow sealed before she could do so. This created a time paradox.
You changed the future. You've created a time paradox.
Or rather, a fate paradox. If that which was supposed to destroy the Erdtree was prevented from doing so, that would make the Erdtree, and by extension Marika and her progeny, effectively immortal. This event marked the creation of the Golden Order, a new order of events to circumvent those written in the stars. The sealed power of the Gloam-eyed Queen became known as the Rune of Destined Death, as in the destined death of the Erdtree. Because this was the power fated to destroy the Erdtree, the Empyrean of the Erdtree, Marika, and her descendants are especially vulnerable to it. This is why the Black Knife Assassins needed the Rune of Destined Death to kill Godwyn. This is why we see Dee and other Golden Order fundamentalists assert the truth of the Golden Order.
Those who live in death fall outside the principles of the Golden Order. Their mere existence sullies the guidance of gold, tainting its truth. And so it is the vermin must be exterminated, down to the very last.
They believe Marika's ordained future is more true, more valid, than the future written in the stars. They know in some sense they must act to make it true. So how do we place this event in the timeline? I believe we can by looking at the Black Blade incantation. The emblem behind the image of the incantation itself shows up in few other spells, notably the Elden Stars incantation. Elden Stars is described as the oldest incantation to derive from the Erdtree. We can infer that, because they share an emblem, that Maliketh's Black Blade is similarly old. This would place Maliketh's sealing of the Rune of Destined Death very early in the age of the Erdtree, probably shortly before the war with the Giants. In this theory, it is not necessary to think Marika removed the rune from the Elden Ring herself, or that the Rune of Destined Death was ever within the Elden Ring. In the game, we see many instances of runes having power completely independent of the Elden Ring. It is also not necessary to think the Gloam-eyed Queen was ever a vessel of the Elden Ring. I believe the Rune of Destined Death simply came into being when the Gloam-eyed Queen's power was sealed. The rune we see is the form that it takes when it was separated from her sword. We also see instances in the game of entirely new mending runes being created through sheer willpower. Neither the number of runes, nor the number of things that can be turned into a rune are finite. It is fitting that, in the end, it is the Gloam-eyed Queen's power which destroys the Erdtree. By unleashing the Rune of Destined Death, we are fulfilling the destiny written in the stars, by putting an end to the Golden Order. Still, it is left completely unknown whether this actually fixes or returns the timeline to that written in the stars. Most endings show the continuance of Marika's reign in some form or another, with the player as Elden Lord. If this was the outcome Marika was trying to prevent, then I doubt that she would have taken such drastic measures. Ranni's ending shows an order under the guidance of the moon. Who knows what fate this portends for the lands between? Is the fate written in the stars permanently ruined? Was it a good thing for Marika to defy fate in this way? Leave what you think in the comments. This has been the Elden Conspiracy, signing out.